This session examines the shifting nature of ancient scripture, tracing its evolution from sacred law into a historical artifact. The traditional perspective establishes this text as the definitive divine manual, structuring holy living through detailed laws covering sacrifices, purity, and sacred seasons. The shift from the medieval four-layered sense of scripture, the quadriga, to the Reformation's principle of a single, simple sense fundamentally altered how the text was read. The authoritative King James Bible, which profoundly shaped the English language, has continuously evolved through thousands of revisions in spelling, punctuation, and form. The Dead Sea Scrolls challenge the modern concept of the Bible by revealing that ancient scripture consisted of multiple, coexisting textual traditions recorded on fragile scrolls. The community at Qumran lived outside the mainstream, developing a unique, apocalyptic worldview with different calendars and scriptural beliefs than the Jerusalem temple authorities. The meaning of the Dead Sea Scrolls and the function of the Qumran site remain contentious, with scholars having no consensus on whether it was a monastery, a factory, or a military fortress. The documentary hypothesis suggests the Pentateuch is a composite work woven together from four primary source texts known as J, E, D, and P. Scholarly theories, though unsettled, propose a radical connection between Egyptian solar worship under Pharaoh Akhenaten and the development of Israelite monotheism, citing parallels in temple design and reverence for light. The Gospel of Judas is one example showing how intensely diverse early Christian beliefs were, diversifying as quickly and creatively as Darwin's finches before the canon was selected. As culture secularizes, the Bible transforms from a sacred manual into a powerful, often ironic, cultural toolkit for modernist social critique. Instead of viewing texts like Leviticus as a static manual, we now understand them as dynamic, living artifacts, constantly reshaped by composition, interpretation, and historical context. Ancient texts are not silent monuments, but living histories that actively challenge and enrich our understanding with every new generation. This journey will explore crucial concepts in biblical studies, supported by primary sources like the Dead Sea Scrolls and the insights of key scholars. Welcome to this presentation from organization name, reflecting our deep commitment to tradition and scholarship. This presentation analyzes the fraught transition to monarchy in 1 and 2 Samuel, revealing the foundational instability and deep national self-criticism inherent in Israel's new kingship. Driven by internal corruption and the external military threat of the Philistines, the old tribal order was failing, putting the nation on the verge of total collapse. Rejecting divine rule for a human solution, the Israelites demanded a king, despite Samuel's prophecy that the monarchy they sought for security would eventually become their instrument of oppression. Saul, Israel's first king, rose to power based on human appeal, but ultimately fell because of his fatal insecurity and continual disobedience to divine command. David, the shepherd anointed by God, transitioned from a simple giant slayer to the unifier of Israel, the founder of Jerusalem, and the recipient of the everlasting Davidic covenant. The narrative of King David's great sin delivers a profound message of self-criticism. Unchecked power inevitably corrupts even the most divinely anointed leaders. David's abuse of power initiated a devastating cycle of family violence and rebellion that permanently defined the decline and unraveling of his kingdom. Archaeological evidence, including identical city gates and regional forts, provides physical context, grounding the biblical accounts of the early Israelite monarchy in real history. The centralized monarchy of Israel was forged in crisis, achieving powerful political stability at a significant spiritual and moral cost. This narrative establishes a permanent critique of human governance, asserting that all power is flawed and leaders must always be held accountable to a higher standard. We explore the historical journey of the foundational text, tracing how the enduring word transformed from Moses' covenant into a continually reinterpreted modern canon. Standing on the plains of Moab, a new generation of Israel waits at the border of the Promised Land, facing the critical challenge of preserving their covenant identity after Moses' death. The covenant was committed to writing, transforming the oral agreement into an enduring text that serves as both a guide and a reminder for future generations. The Dead Sea Scrolls revealed the library of the Essenes, a separatist, apocalyptic community who viewed their unique collection of biblical and sectarian texts as a spiritual fortress in the desert. The Qumran community interpreted prophecies using Pesher as applying directly to their immediate apocalyptic present, relying on a diverse and fluid canon of authoritative texts. The purpose of the Qumran settlement and the authorship of the Dead Sea Scrolls remain fiercely contested, revealing a deep fracture in academic consensus. More than a religious text, the King James Bible is a literary masterpiece that established the vocabulary and style for centuries of English-speaking culture. The King James Bible has undergone centuries of minor editorial refinement, focusing on standardizing spelling and correcting errors to preserve the original translation's textual fidelity and accessibility. The medieval quadriga, or the four senses of Scripture, provided a systematic method for interpreting the literal text to uncover layered allegorical, moral, and eschatological divine truths. Martin Luther initiated a revolution in biblical interpretation by rejecting the fourfold mystical approach and insisting on sola scriptura, which prioritized the single, clear, literal historical meaning of the text. Academic higher criticism analyzes the Bible's composition by proposing that key texts, including the Pentateuch and the Gospels, were compiled from multiple distinct sources. Archaeological findings consistently provide physical evidence that corroborates the historical realities presented in the biblical texts. The enduring foundational text survives not as a static relic, but because it remains at the center of a vital, unending conversation, engaged by every generation. We investigate the textual and historical evolution of the conquest of Canaan narrative, tracing its development from ancient scrolls to modern scholarship. This slide maps the core narrative arc of the book of Joshua, tracing the journey from divine commission and entry into Canaan to the complete fulfillment of the promised land settlement. The evolution from ancient scrolls to the book-like codex fundamentally transformed the biblical text, adding standardization, punctuation, and navigation essential for preservation. The Dead Sea Scrolls, dating to the 3rd century BCE, revealed unprecedented textual diversity that shattered the idea of a single, standardized Bible existing during the time of Jesus. The true nature of Qumran remains fiercely debated among scholars, illustrating that the meaning and origin of the Dead Sea Scrolls are far from settled facts. The King James Bible was a masterful revision of prior English Bibles, whose text has continued to evolve since its initial 1611 publication. This introductory slide frames the central scholarly debate: do the biblical text and the archaeological spade align when reconstructing the history of the Holy Land? Archaeological finds like common city gate designs, the disappearance of Gath, and specific naming patterns confirm that the Bible preserves authentic historical traditions from the era of David and Solomon. A radical theory suggests that key aspects of the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Old Testament reflect a transmitted memory of Pharaoh Akhenaten's monotheistic revolution in Egypt. The medieval quadriga was a fourfold method of scriptural interpretation, requiring readers to find literal, allegorical, moral, and ultimate heavenly meaning in every biblical passage. Luther rejected the arbitrary multiple senses of the medieval church, asserting that the grammatical and historical meaning of Scripture has one simple message, centered entirely on Christ. The Enlightenment gave rise to higher criticism, treating sacred texts as complex, historical, and literary artifacts rather than purely divine works. In the modern era, the Bible's cultural role shifted from a source of absolute truth to a haunting echo used to drive powerful social critique against societal injustice. Decades after their discovery, the Dead Sea Scrolls are still defined by numerous fundamental black holes, key unresolved questions regarding the Qumran community's identity and core beliefs. To conquest in high definition means moving beyond a single, simple historical account to appreciate the full, complex depth of this living narrative. This session launches an archaeological investigation into the ancient origins and text of the Apocalypse. To truly understand the unsettling book of Revelation, we must move beyond predicting the future and dig deep into its historical and literary foundations. The slide demonstrates that the Book of Revelation is a highly symbolic work of apocalyptic literature, a genre meant as crisis literature, rather than a literal chronological timeline of the future. Interpreting apocalyptic literature requires decoding a specialized vocabulary built on symbolic numbers, potent imagery, and extended allegories. The Book of Revelation was a coded message of resistance and hope, written for Christians actively suffering under the oppressive power of the Roman Empire. The Qumran community and John's audience shared a parallel apocalyptic mindset, viewing their contemporary struggles not as isolated events, but as the final, decisive conflict in a cosmic drama.
The journey from original writings to the biblical canon was a complex, centuries-long process marked by textual variation and debate.
The medieval quadriga was a standard fourfold method that examined Scripture to find the literal, allegorical, moral, and ultimate heavenly meaning in every biblical text. Martin Luther fundamentally redefined how the Bible was read by demanding that Scripture possesses one simple, literal, primary meaning rather than relying on complex allegorical schemes. New discoveries and historical criticism have fractured scholarly consensus, transforming the interpretation of ancient texts into a crisis of understanding rather than a source of clarity. By viewing its layered history, genre, and context, Revelation is revealed not as a predictive timeline, but as a powerful work of symbolic art, offering hope and resilience during crisis. The Book of Revelation remains an open invitation to continue the archaeological dig, grappling with its timeless themes and powerful echo in the present day. This slide sets the stage for Act 1, the unveiling of chaos, by challenging the audience with the central assertion: the apocalypse is not what you think it is. The popular vision of the apocalypse as an explosive ending often ignores the reality of slow, self-inflicted societal collapse. Hollywood built the entire blockbuster genre on the spectacle of catastrophe, feeding a primal human urge to see our world destroyed on a global scale. The vast menu of doomsday scenarios we imagine reflects the dominant cultural anxieties of the time. Threats to the planet exist both in the scale of cosmic indifference and the consequences of our own neglect. Apocalyptic narratives reveal that the breakdown of society, not the inciting monster or virus, is the true focus of the story. The anxieties of the era reveal that humanity's deepest fears, whether rogue AI or nuclear war, are consistently the result of our own making. This presentation challenges the common concept of the apocalypse, suggesting we have fundamentally misunderstood its meaning for centuries. The original Greek meaning of the word apocalypse is not destruction, but rather an unveiling or a revelation. Apocalyptic stories function as a social critique, using the spectacle of destruction to unveil profound human truths. These seemingly futuristic stories are actually high-volume reflections of our current anxieties, forcing us to confront today's urgent realities. These diverse dystopian narratives consistently visualize humanity's deepest shared fears concerning societal collapse and existential consequence. These intense scenarios are not pessimistic predictions, but rather a passionate warning demanding we choose a different path. Ultimately, the apocalypse serves as an unveiling of ourselves, forcing us to examine our relationship with our own creations and the world around us. We must examine the stories we tell about global crises to uncover the urgent truths they reveal about ourselves before it is too late. Join us as we explore how the concept of the apocalypse shifts from global catastrophe to sharp social critique. Our collective imagination is currently obsessed with vivid, catastrophic visions of total world collapse driven by movies, books, and video games. When imagining global catastrophe, our anxieties typically fall into four main categories: external threat, ecological collapse, biological breakdown, or technological betrayal. This leads us to question whether the entire dramatic narrative is rooted in a fundamental historical misunderstanding of the original word. The word apocalypse, derived from Greek, literally means an unveiling or revelation, not a catastrophe. The original intent of apocalyptic literature was not to predict global ruin, but to provide a message of hope and assurance of ultimate divine justice to oppressed communities. The modern secular apocalypse retains the spectacle of judgment, but replaces divine intervention with natural catastrophe, making human science and grit the sole path to survival. Even without a divine plan, our modern anxieties still fall back on an ancient four-part eschatological framework built on prophecy, natural retribution, final judgment, and temporal expectation. Complex modern crises are commonly framed using an ancient pattern that requires both an authoritative prophet and an ensuing moral judgment. These imagined futures are not predictions, but powerful mirrors that offer critical clarity on the present flaws and values of our own society. Dystopian stories hold a mirror up to our greatest anxieties, projecting them onto a world-ending scale so we are forced to confront them. We follow the concept of the apocalypse from the common misconception of catastrophe to its deeper purpose as a revelation and social critique. End-of-the-world stories are reflections of the world we inhabit today, forcing us to ask what they truly unveil about our current anxieties. Pop culture has relentlessly defined the apocalypse for us through spectacular visions of meteors, zombies, and the collapse of civilization. Our pop culture obsession has created a full menu of distinct doomsday scenarios, categorizing humanity's primal fears of its own end. We are going to challenge the modern, catastrophic understanding of the apocalypse by returning to the original source of the word itself. The original Greek word apocalypsis simply means an unveiling or revelation, representing the act of pulling back a curtain to reveal a hidden truth. Historically, the original apocalypse was a revelation of hope, written to assure oppressed communities that justice would eventually prevail. As religious concepts moved into secular pop culture, we stripped the spectacular imagery of its divine context, shifting the meaning from God's plan to human grit and survival. Our fears of the apocalypse have evolved to mirror the anxieties of the age, shifting the blame for impending destruction from divine judgment to human action. Scientific revelation is not granted by prophecy, but is earned through painstaking logic, leading to the sudden, electric clarity of a eureka moment. The iconic structure of the DNA double helix was unveiled through a crucial, staged series of scientific breakthroughs. Despite their different methods, religious revelation and scientific discovery are both fueled by the fundamental human impulse to pull back the curtain and understand the hidden rules of the game. Modern apocalyptic stories are not predictions of the future, but rather a form of social critique that unveils the hidden truth about our present reality. Apocalyptic stories function as powerful mirrors, reflecting our deepest collective fears about the collapse of civilization, war, and the preservation of basic human morality. We must view the apocalypse not as a global catastrophe, but as a social mirror reflecting uncomfortable truths about ourselves. We begin by redefining the term apocalypse, focusing on its original meaning of an unveiling. The word we associate with catastrophic destruction, apocalypsis, actually translates from the Greek as an unveiling or a revelation. The concept of apocalypse invites us to explore two paths of revelation: the quest for moral meaning, and the pursuit of empirical knowledge. The apocalypse of meaning introduces the urgent search for moral clarity in a chaotic world. Apocalyptic literature created an ancient four-part blueprint involving prophecy, natural retribution, judgment, and the now and not yet to interpret suffering and promise eventual justice. This slide shows that we unconsciously apply the ancient pattern of the prophetic figure who reveals hidden guiding truths to frame modern anxieties like QAnon, climate data, and generalized scientific authority. The environmental crisis has drawn a clear moral line, separating those responsible for the future from the reckless polluters who will face judgment. Apocalyptic narratives function as a powerful social mirror, allowing us to critique our present behaviors by viewing them as the causes of a future destruction. Path 2, titled The Apocalypse of Knowledge, introduces our focus on seeking empirical truth in the physical world. Great scientific breakthroughs, like the discovery of DNA structure, result from painstaking effort culminating in a sudden moment of eureka insight. The definitive structure of DNA was revealed incrementally through a decade-long trail of crucial scientific discoveries. In 1953, the discovery of the DNA double helix structure finally unveiled the fundamental secret of life. Despite their differing methods, the quests for faith and logic are unified by the fundamental human need to uncover the universe's hidden rules. The inherent human desire to unveil hidden truths, from ancient wisdom to modern science, is what perpetually drives our progress. The next question is, what exactly are we going to unveil?